In late 67, as Johnson is insisting on good news being presented to the American people, General Westmoreland says, "We have reached an important moment when the end begins to come into view."
The enemy cannot win now in Vietnam.
Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese are planning what becomes known as the Tet Offensive, in which a massive series of attacks throughout South Vietnam, designed to ultimately topple the South Vietnamese government, to cause an uprising on the part of the populace, and to end the war on communist terms.
Les Quan believed that by simultaneously attacking the cities and towns across South Vietnam with main force units, that it would be powerful enough to inspire the masses to rise up and topple the Saigon regime once and for all. So this was how, Vietnamese communist troops would win in short order. Ho Chi Minh and General Giap did not believe that, this strategy should be implemented at the time in the manner that Les Quan saw fit. They always believed that, Les Quan's strategy was always just too risky, and it risked losing all the gains made at that point by the Communist Army. So that was the disagreement in 1967. Les Quan, using the powers of his police state, arrested all of his enemies. All of this was to send a signal, send a sign to Ho Chi Minh and General Giap, who could not be arrested, to sort of quit their opposition to Les Quan's decisions and his strategy. Les Quan prevailed.
The North Vietnamese are pretty smart. They launch a preliminary attack at Khe Sanh on January 21st, even while, basically 80,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong are positioning themselves for what becomes the Tet Offensive.
I went to Khe Sanh in December, right? On the 20th of January is when, all hell broke loose. And they attacked both 861 and the base in full strength with this enormous artillery barrage. Cut the road and basically cut the base off. The actual, quote, siege was about 2 months. I think there were roughly 6,000 Marines at the base, and there were roughly 40,000 in VA surrounding us. They had this enormous advantage in terms of artillery and so forth. And they were just slamming the base every day. The advantage we had that, say for example, the French didn't have at Dien Bien Phu was air power. As the siege went on and the weather got better, right, air power just decimated these guys.
When the communists launched a countrywide attack called the Tet Offensive of 1968, the Americans launched a ferocious counterattack and drove the communists from all the cities and towns they had occupied.
Tet had an enormous psychological effect, more of a psychological effect than a military effect.
To say that we are closer to victory today is to believe, in the face of the evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past. To suggest we are on the edge of defeat is to yield to unreasonable pessimism. To say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, if unsatisfactory, conclusion.
Johnson said something to the effect of, if we've lost Walter Cronkite, we've lost the country.
The message of the Tet Offensive to the American administration and to the American people is, yes, unless you continue, not only continue at this level, but unless you sink more into this war, you're not going to win. So there was two different perceptions, really, in Vietnam and in the United States.
March was a very dramatic month. Clark Clifford, when he became Secretary of Defense, was one of the two men who were deeply involved and really led that effort to push the president to reconsider some of these positions. The other was my great friend and colleague Harry McPherson, who was then the chief speechwriter for the president. Clifford was asked to report on his trip to Vietnam. He said, we have three alternatives. One is to extend our troop commitment to roughly 1 million men. No one wanted to do that. The second was to concentrate our troops in highly populated other critical areas. Nobody wanted to do that. And the third is to begin a staged withdrawal. Clifford was doing an adroit lawyer's trick, really, was to put on the table this issue, and he did it in the context of two obviously unattractive options, leaving only withdrawal. Harry wrote, at the president's request, a Hawkey speech and a Dovey speech. For a while, the president was working with the Hawkey speech, and then he called and said, now make these additions to speech B, which was the Dovey speech, and Harry called Clark Clifford and said, we have prevailed.
Tet represented a defeat for Lyndon Johnson. In the aftermath of Tet, he comes to a decision that, just as he feared, Vietnam has been his undoing. Just as he feared, he is politically defeated in many respects. And he makes the decision that he's not going to run for re-election in 1968.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.